To inform the House that the deadlines for the nominations for the Select Committee chairs passed at 4 p.m. today. The following committees received a single nomination and the candidate will be elected unopposed. Backbench Business, Bob Blackman. Culture, Media and Sport, Dame Caroline Dinage. Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Mr Alistair Carmichael. Health and Social Care, Leila Moran. Northern Ireland Affairs, Tony Antoniazzi. Petitions, Jamie Stone. Treasury, Dame Meg Hillier. Welsh Affairs, Ruth Jones. I congratulate the members concerned. The ballot for the remaining posts will take place on Wednesday, the 11th of September, between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. in Committee Room 15. A final list of candidates and their supporters will be available in the vote office later this evening. We now come to the following statement. I call Simon Lightwood.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I wish to make a statement. Mr Speaker, today marks the first stop on this government's journey to deliver better buses. Day in, day out, buses shoulder the needs of millions of working people across the country. Whether it's getting to work or school, seeing the doctor or friends, a reliable bus service is the difference between aspiration and isolation, between getting on or being forced to give up. A lifeline, plain and simple. But over the past 4 decades of deregulation, this lifeline has been on life support. Communities have suffered cuts to the thousands of services, with 1.5 billion fewer journeys taking place in 2019 compared with 1985, when deregulation began. And since 2010, a staggering 300 million fewer miles have been driven by buses per year. That is a legacy the previous government has left behind. A shocking decline in this country's bus services, which has done untold harm to communities across the country. But behind these stats lie human stories of the poorest groups who catch 10 times as many buses as trains, regularly let down. Of people denied access to work or education because they can't depend on the journey there. Or women and girls denied access to a safe journey home. This represents a steady cycle of decline that reverberates beyond buses to our economy as a whole, of public services not working for working people. Mr Speaker, enough is enough. This mission-focused government was elected to repair what's broken and reform what doesn't work. And we're clear that better buses are essential to a better Britain. That buses aren't just a route to connection, but to economic growth, cleaner air, and a fairer chance for everyone in life. That is why my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, has made fixing this country's broken bus network one of her top priorities in her department. And that's why, just 2 months into office, we're kick-starting a bus revolution that will put services back in the hands of local leaders, achieving in just 10 weeks what the previous government failed to do in over 14 years. The statutory instrument we laid this morning opens up bus franchising for all local transport authorities in England. It gives local leaders increased flexibility to adopt a model that works for their areas. And by streamlining the current two-step process, authorities will now only need to obtain the Transport Secretary's consent before preparing a franchise scheme. This is a transformative change, one which will give every community the same powers that mayoral combined authorities across the country are currently using to deliver better services, and the power to match them to local needs. We know the franchising model works. Just look at Greater Manchester's B network. where buses were brought under public control just 1 year ago, and where already reliability has improved, passenger numbers have grown, and a new 24/7 service has just been introduced. Or look at Greater London, where public control has meant more bus journeys are now taken in our capital than the rest of England combined. Mr. Speaker, we're taking aim at the current postcode lottery of bus services to ensure our most popular form of public transport starts running in the public interest. Local authorities know best how to deliver for their communities. That's why today we're empowering them to follow in Greater Manchester and London's footsteps, to make sure that they have buses in the right place at the right time, truly serving local needs. Our plan will help turn the tide after decades of decline. Today's statutory instrument will also be backed by a public consultation, which my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, has also launched today. It seeks views on breaking down the barriers to franchising and how we support safer and more accessible services. Because by delivering simpler guidance, it will support and speed up the franchising process, meaning councils spend less time and money filling out forms and more time planning routes and prioritising the interests of the communities they serve. But, Mr. Speaker, this is just the start of our journey. Today's steps will pave the way to a new bus bill later in this parliamentary session, a bill that plans to reform funding, allow franchises to be rolled out to more places quicker and cheaper, and support those councils who choose not to franchise but who still want the flexibility to deliver on local transport priorities. And, Mr. Speaker, it will allow us to remove the ideological ban on municipal bus companies imposed by the previous government. Despite the huge success of these companies seen across the country where they are still in place, like the award-winning publicly owned services in Nottingham and Reading. Mr. Speaker, this rightly isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, and crucially places no additional burden on taxpayers. It simply acknowledges a truth that many in this House will agree with, that the best decisions aren't always made by Whitehall. They are made in town and city halls across the country, by those accountable to local communities, by those who day in, day out use the very services that we're talking about. Mr. Speaker, it's been said before, and I will say it again. The Department of Transport under this new government is moving fast and fixing things. Today's steps place better buses at the heart of this government's plan for change. Because 4 decades after buses were deregulated, after 14 years of decline, we are now empowering communities to take back control of the services that they depend on, to get Britain moving, to get our economy growing, and to get more passengers, wherever they live, back on board. And with that, I commend this statement to the House.
We come to the Shadow Minister, Dr. Kieran Mullan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for his statement. We on this side of the House are in full agreement that good local transport is something everyone deserves access to, both for helping people to live their lives and for fulfilling the economic potential of all parts of the country. And at the heart of our local transport services are buses. They are some of the most convenient, well-connected and accessible forms of public transport out there. Crucially, not just in urban areas, but very often in underconnected rural areas as well. Mr. Speaker, that's why in government we invested billions in the bus sector, including the vital support provided to maintain services during the pandemic. We rolled out thousands of new zero-emissions buses, and we introduced the Get Around for £2 scheme, saving millions of people money on their fares and helping to get passengers back onto the buses. These interventions worked. Bus passenger journeys in England increased by nearly a fifth in the year ending March 2023, and we welcome this government's desire to build on our progress. To improve services further, to get more routes running at better frequencies, and to make sure as many people as possible have reliable services that get them where they need to go. Given that, I'm genuinely interested to understand how the government feel that this set of measures will achieve that, and we're worried about some of the significant risks which it doesn't seem the government has considered. This legislation places greater responsibility in the hands of local authorities, Mr Speaker. We know there are a number of local authorities facing financial and organisational challenges, and whilst I don't doubt there will be enthusiasm to make use of these new powers, running any form of public transport brings with it real challenges. Of course, as the Minister himself said on opposition, gaps in experience could be filled by support from the Department for Transport. But depending on the number of local authorities that choose to take up franchising, this could mean significant central government resources are required. Unless I've missed it, today's announcement looks to include absolutely no funding to pay for increased capacity at the department. What projections have the government made of these costs? How exactly do they expect them to be paid? It's the same story with local government finances. Make no mistake about it, this is going to cost money. Many bus routes, especially rural services, are themselves loss-making, and that's before you account for the additional resources that local authorities will presumably need to operate them. The Minister in his statement did not recognise at all the enormous challenges that have been created by changing travel patterns post-COVID. If this government is committed to services at 1985 levels, which he seemed to imply, they're going to have to commit to enormous levels of subsidy. Yeah. I welcome the success stories in metropolitan areas that the Minister talked about, but they operate in a fundamentally different space because of the density of their populations. It also means that if passenger numbers fall next year, it's no longer a private company taking the financial risk, but the local council and, by definition, taxpayers. Again, given that there doesn't appear to be any funding attached to this policy, surely this can only be funded by increases to council tax or cuts to other local services. And it's the same story when it comes to responsibility for capital expenditure, Mr Speaker. Will this now be the local authority's responsibility? How exactly are they expected to fund it? As we made clear during the recent Passenger Railway Services Bill, it may be the priority of the Labour Party to undertake ideological reforms to bring the transport sector further into the control of the state. But passengers' priorities are the price, performance and reliability of services, not who's running them. We want to hear how these reforms will make a difference to journeys for passengers and their accessibility, frequency and cost. How will this help to restore the number of rural services? How will this make journeys cheaper for passengers? And not just in terms of the generic pledges we've heard today, but with concrete commitments that the public can hold them to account to deliver. The Minister made absolutely no commitments today to increase levels of services or miles travelled as part of their revolution. There are some quite simple things they could do for passengers, like extending our Get Around for £2 scheme, which has been hugely positive for passengers and the viability of services up and down the country. I'm aware the Chancellor is not the colleagues opposite favourite person at the moment, but I would encourage them in any hurriedly organised meetings today and tomorrow to make the case for the cost of living benefits of the £2 scheme, as well as the benefits of the winter fuel payments. They've got the wrong priorities yet again. At the end of the day, passengers care about the preservation of existing services, Mr Speaker, the extension of routes, improvements in frequency and reliability and cost. We on this side of the House are all ears as to what difference this policy will make for them. And not to be forgotten, who is going to pay for it?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Modernising our transport infrastructure and delivering better buses is at the heart of our plan to kickstart economic growth in every part of the country, to get our country moving. This SI is just the start of a package of measures, Mr Speaker. The Buses Bill will deliver further measures on issues such as funding. Despite the challenging financial circumstances we find ourselves in, inherited from the previous government, we are determined to deliver better bus services, growing passenger numbers and driving opportunity to underserved regions. All funding is being considered, of course, quite rightly, as part of the spending review. Of course, there is no one-size-fits-all approach for buses within local transport authorities. Franchising is just one of the ways in which can be explored. There is also enhanced partnerships and, of course, municipal ownership. We believe firmly that our priorities to deliver better buses across the country are the right priorities, and we have got the mandate from the British people following the general election to do just that.
Grahame Stringer.
Mr Speaker, last week and this week have been the best 2 weeks for public transport for many decades, righting the wrongs of the privatisation of the rail service and the deregulation of buses. I didn't hear an apology from the Conservative spokesperson for laying waste to local government finance over the last 14 years and destroying public bus services by handing them over to profiteers, pirates and other completely unsuitable people, not in all cases, but in many cases, to run our bus service. Does my honourable friend agree with me that there should be a huge and massive apology from the Conservatives for the damage they have done to public transport?
I do believe there should be a massive apology from the opposition for the mess they have left this country in, for the mess they have left our bus services in. Of course, under the previous government, almost 300 million fewer miles are now driven by buses per year compared to 2010. That's an appalling statistic. This government will turn the tide for communities across the country by giving them the opportunity to control local bus services and have a real say in developing the local transit systems that serve them. The Secretary of State said it, and I will say it again, we will move fast and fix things. Here is the proof.
Come to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Wera Hobhouse.
Mr. Speaker, we Liberal Democrats welcome today's statement to give local authorities, not just metro mayors, more powers and the potential to run their own bus services. We Liberal Democrats have campaigned for exactly this for a very long time. The previous Conservative government has completely decimated local public transport systems, but the rot set in a long time ago. Almost a quarter of bus routes have been cut in the last 10 years outside London, and whoever wants to apologise for that, we need to see some change. Yet bus services should be the most affordable and accessible of all forms of public transport. Good, well-used bus services would significantly contribute to getting to net zero, but also to improving our air quality, and the previous government, again, completely failed to make a positive case for that. Mr. Speaker, public buses are crucial not just in urban areas like Bath, which suffers from more and more congestion because people can continue to increase motorised individuals' travel, but also Bath is obviously struggling still with cutting air pollution. But this is specifically, bus services is specifically important for rural areas. Can the Minister set out how today's announcement will improve rural bus services, not just in the long term, but in the short term, because what we currently have is completely inadequate?
I thank the honourable member for her question. I think that the ability to take back control, local areas, local transport authorities, to take back control of their bus services is crucial for rural areas because they know their communities best. Those decisions shouldn't be made from places in Westminster or Whitehall. So I think it's local transport authorities, again, who understand the very specific needs of their local communities, be those rural communities or urban communities, are best placed to make the decision to design the network around the needs of their individual community.
Grahame Morris.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the statement and can I draw to the Minister's attention the Transport Select Committee report on bus services in England outside of Greater London, which was under the chairmanship of his ministerial colleague, the Honourable Member for Nottingham South. There's some excellent recommendations in there. And in regions like Greater Manchester, the process of introducing bus franchising has been quite lengthy. Granting combined authorities the ability to directly award contracts would significantly shorten this timeline, allowing areas such as the North East to bring about faster improvements. My question is this: will the Minister confirm that the Better Buses Bill will include provisions for direct award powers?
I can confirm that my officials are investigating the means to do just that, and I will update the House accordingly as progress continues.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Minister's statement, and he, the House, local government finance is under pressure. And the House also knows that the delivery of services in rural areas is much more costly than it is in the Manchesters and the Nottinghams and the Londons. That's just a geographical fact which I think we all accept. Could I urge the Minister, if he hasn't already done so, to engage the good offices of the County Council network as the lead body for county councils and the unitaries to find their view with suggestions. But can I say to him politely, if this is to work in rural areas for all the good reasons which he sets out about social mobility and access to work and education, this is going to require some extra money for rural councils if they are to deliver what I think we all probably want to see achieved.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. I also thank his constructive engagement there, and I will certainly take up his recommendation to meet with that grouping. Of course, all funding is being considered in the round as part of the spending review, but I take his point on board.
Thank
you, Speaker. I very much welcome the Minister's statement. Deregulation has been an absolute disaster in South Yorkshire. Since 2010, bus passenger miles have fallen by 50%. That means lots of people are not getting the services they previously had. Now, the Minister referred to Greater London. Greater London gets more than 10 times as much finance per head from government as South Yorkshire does for transport. Mentioned Greater Manchester. Manchester got a very good BSIP settlement last time round. South Yorkshire got nothing in the BSIP settlement. So does he recognise the need to review some of these settlements going forward? Otherwise, Mayor Oliver Coppard, committed to franchising, might see that the only responsibility they have is to make the cuts to bus services in a different way to what they would have been without franchising.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. What we want to do is, there's a whole host, a plethora of different funding pots that relate to buses, and we're keen to amalgamate, to consolidate those, but importantly to devolve those to local areas and give them the flexibility that they need with that funding to deliver better buses across their areas.
Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker, and it's great to hear that the success of the last government's £1.1 billion investment into Greater Manchester's B network is helping deliver. I was delighted at the time to launch it with the Mayor of Greater Manchester. But one of those key things, and the Minister mentioned it, around that postcode lottery, is actually around the cost of using the bus. It can be something which really puts people off, particularly in rural areas where traditionally bus cost has been a lot higher. So I just asked the Minister if he's going to look at extending the Get Around for £2 scheme, which has been a real success, particularly for access to education opportunities and those in lower paid work in rural areas, because I think it's something that has really helped drive bus passenger numbers since the end of the pandemic upwards.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. Delivering reliable and affordable public transport services for passengers is one of the government's top priorities, and we know how important it is for passengers and for local growth. We're looking at the future of the £2 fare cap as a matter of urgency, and we're considering a most appropriate and affordable approach, and we'll update the House in due course.
John Warren.
Speaker. For as long as I've been in this House, my constituents have looked upon London with envy for one reason, and one reason only: cheaper, more reliable bus services with real-time bus information. Too often my constituents don't even know if a bus is coming to the bus stop, never mind when. Now, Kim McGuinness, our regional mayor, has committed to taking back control of buses. Will the Minister set out how he will work with her and support her to deliver the bus services my constituents need and deserve after 14 years of Tory failure?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. I've already met with the Mayor of the North East on a number of occasions and are working closely with combined authorities and mayors across the country to simplify and make the process of bus franchising easier. We will, of course, make sure that the Department of Transport provides support to local transport authorities as well, with a centralised resource to make sure that we can spread best practice across the country.
Gregory Stafford.
I thank the Minister for his statement. The town of Borden in my constituency is extraordinarily poorly served by bus routes at the moment. The thing they're really crying out for is a rail-linked bus service to the neighbouring town of Liphook. Will he meet with me and his officials to discuss how we can get a rail-linked bus from Borden to Liphook?
I'm more than happy to meet with any honourable friend or member.
Alison Home. Alison Home.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the statement today, as will my constituents in Scarborough, Whitby and the villages, who have seen the vital bus services they rely on slashed over recent years. For example, cuts to the 95 flights to Whitby service have severely restricted the ability of my constituents to go about their daily lives. Does my honourable friend agree with me that we need to move at pace to improve routes such as this in rural and coastal communities?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. I do completely agree, and that's fundamental to the work that we've been pursuing to make franchising quicker and simpler, to avoid the need for local transport authorities to spend their time filling in forms at great expense. I think Britain is one of the few places in the developed world that hands operators power to slash bus services and set fares with very little say for communities who depend on them. Decades of failed regulation have left communities with little say over essential services that they rely on. We're determined to change that.
Anna Sabine.
I welcome the statement from the Minister today, and as my honourable friend said, the Lib Dems broadly welcome the principles of this. As I think all the Somerset Bus Partnership, which is a fantastic organisation in my constituency of volunteers working tirelessly to encourage people to use buses. My question is that in Somerset we have a council which is facing a historic funding crisis and narrowly avoided bankruptcy, and I'd be keen to understand how for authorities like that the government's going to provide some long-term funding that means they can actually do the franchising that's been promised.
I thank the honourable member for their question. We are looking, as I said, to consolidate and simplifying the funding pots that are out there already for bus services and looking hopefully to deliver more multi-year funding settlements around this.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the statement by the Minister genuinely taking control of our buses after years and years of the wheels on the bus not going round and round. Yes. I look forward to seeing a direct service return from Runcorn to Liverpool. I'd like the Minister to have to meet with me and leaders in Cheshire to discuss bus service arrangement, taking control of a new devolution deal.
We'll, of course, welcome the opportunity to meet with my honourable friend.
James Shaw. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for a very progressive, positive statement today, which will encourage many. I do welcome the steps towards a more personalised approach in bus franchises. However, I believe it is essential, and I think the Minister thinks that as well, that any changes are rural-proofed to ensure that bus services will allow our rural communities to commute to work, to be able to access medical appointments, and indeed even to go shopping. And that is protected with a service over a profit ironclad guarantee. So can the Minister confirm this is the government position on this very issue? Thanks so much.
I thank the honourable member for his question. I absolutely agree that rural bus routes and rural communities must be carefully considered, and I think the best people to take that consideration is local leaders, and that's why we're determined to allow local leaders to take back control of their bus services.
Justin Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I welcome my honourable friend's statement this afternoon? Villages in my constituency, like Eccles, Burham and Waldham, have suffered after 14 years of Conservative cuts and a reduction to the 155 bus service, which many elderly people rely on. Can I get some assurances from the Minister that local councils like Medway and Kent County Council can now join forces and collaborate on bus routes so that we can see an improvement to bus services for all our residents, including those in rural isolated communities?
Thank my honourable friend for his question. The plan is for all local transport authorities to be able to take back control of their buses. There's also the option, obviously, of enhanced partnerships and municipal ownership, and I look forward to working with him to achieve his objectives.
Lee Pitcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Buses are the most used form of public transport and are a lifeline for those on lower incomes. The inadequacy of bus services right the way across Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme comes up regularly when I'm on the doorstep. Hatfield Woodhouse only recently had a bus reinstated after many, many months of having nothing at all. Does he agree that delivering better buses will be essential for the government's mission, including everything from growing our economy to breaking down barriers of opportunity and accelerating to net zero?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. I think he's absolutely right. I think that effective public transport, effective bus services are fundamental to delivering many of our missions in government.
Sean Woolcock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the weekend, I had the pleasure of attending the unveiling of two brand new community-led, community-owned green buses in the village of Middleton in my constituency. After 14 years of devastation to public bus services in Oxfordshire, these sort of schemes can go a long way to filling the gap. Does the Minister agree with me that the decade of renewal promised by this Labour government must see an improvement and regeneration in rural bus services?
I thank my friend for his question. Absolutely, I agree, which is why we want to give local transport authorities and local leaders the power to take back control of the bus services to shape the future of those services that accurately reflect the needs of individual communities.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank the Minister for his statement. I think we should speak about buses much more often in this place. Edinburgh has an award-winning bus service. It carries 2 million passengers per week. Its highly unionised workforce, I think over 90%, works in collaboration with the directors of the company. And we already get around for £2 inside Edinburgh because that is the price you pay for no matter how far you travel inside Edinburgh. It's a fantastic example of what public ownership in public transport can do. So does the Minister agree that more ownership and control of bus services are key to driving down costs for passengers, increasing patronage and hitting our net zero goals? Thank you.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I've been pleased to visit a municipal bus company in Nottingham. My honourable friend, my colleague here, who's a MP in the area, and I was blown away by the level of commitment to the local area, their knowledge and commitment to the local area, having received numerous awards and having something like an 89% satisfaction rating. So I think municipal bus companies are also a fantastic option for local transport authorities, to consider.
Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I have to say that I found it interesting to hear the opposition front bench talk about the importance of preserving existing bus routes when it is their party which has presided over 14 years where thousands of bus services were lost to communities across the country, including in my constituency, where we still don't have a direct bus route from Nantwich to our local hospital. And doesn't the fact that it has taken this government just 10 weeks to present a plan to fix local bus services just epitomise how underserved our communities and our local economies have been by 14 long years of Conservative failure?
I couldn't agree with my honourable friend more. The government's plans are the biggest reform to England's bus system in 40 years, putting power in the hands of communities who need them most. Today's announcement is a vital first step to achieve this.
Look, Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was great to visit First Bus's all-electric depot in York the other week, but I was saddened to hear just days later First withdrew children's monthly bus passes. After meeting them, they're reviewing this. But does my honourable friend agree with me that travel to and from school should be affordable, and will he meet with me to discuss the future of buses in York?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. Of course, I want to make sure that bus fares are affordable, and I will, of course, meet with the my honourable friend to discuss his particular circumstances.
Ollie Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we all have been saying, over the last 14 years the previous government has been in office, local bus services, especially in coastal communities, have been left in a shocking state. In East Thanet, the number 33, the number 34, the number 9 and the 8A have all been drastically cut back, meaning that in certain areas of Broadstairs and Ramsgate there is no bus service at all within easy reach, and no one in either town has access to a bus to Canterbury outside of commuter times. This surely, Mr. Speaker, will be a challenge to Conservative-run Kent County Council for them to take the powers that are being offered by this government in order to be able to serve a disadvantaged community like that in East Thanet.
I thank my little friend for her comments. Buses matter to millions of people But after 14 years of the Tories' broken bus system, failed countless communities and has led to a spiral of decline in bus services, I hope all local transport authorities consider the range of options available to them to take back control of their buses and shape services for the communities in which they serve.
John Slinger.
After the deregulation and decline of buses under the previous administration, I imagine that local authorities are somewhat shocked and surprised at being given the opportunity to shape services genuinely in the public interest. So what additional support is my honourable friend considering to empower local authorities, especially smaller district authorities like Rugby Borough Council, so that they can move fast and fix things locally?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. In the Department of Transport, we're increasing the capacity of the department to assist smaller authorities so that all local transport authorities can consider franchising and other means of improving bus services in their communities.
Jacob Collier.
Mr Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for his statement. I'm pleased to see him driving forward this policy to improve our bus services, a vital lifeline for my constituents in Burton and Uttoxeter. Does the Minister agree that this plan puts us on the right route by expanding franchising powers so that local voices can finally steer bus services in the right direction?
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and may I say that he's already been a fierce advocate for public transport and bus services in his constituency. Local leaders will have the power to set routes, fares, services, not private operators, as is currently the case, putting passengers first after decades of regulation. That's the option available to you through franchising. Municipal ownership is also an option, as well as partnerships with operators and local authorities.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As the Minister's already pointed out, and other than this chamber have said, bus franchising has clearly delivered fantastic results where it's already in operation in Greater Manchester and in London. However, it's not going to be right for all communities. In my constituency of Dartford, it's often the case that there are only 2 buses a day connecting the outlying villages to Dartford and other population centres. Does he agree with me that the upcoming buses bill will be a fantastic opportunity to end the postcode lottery of bus services across the country, providing maximum flexibility to local leaders, such as in Kent, if they're prepared to use it, to choose the right system for their populations?
I agree with my honourable friend. We must turn the page on years of Conservative failure in local transport, which is why the forthcoming buses bill, in conjunction with our announcements today, will help end the country's transport postcode lottery.
Right, that completes the statement. I'll let the front benches change over.